So I've been playing Etheria Restart for quite some time now, and I have some thoughts about it. You see, turn-based gacha games have been around for more than a decade now, and not that long ago, it was the main genre for gacha games. And so after all this time had passed, these days, you gotta come up with something very enticing to draw people in. And honestly, I believe Etheria Restart is able to do that, especially since it feels so free-to-play friendly. But at the same time, it also has some drawbacks, in my opinion. And so in this video, I'll share my thoughts about this brand new title, and hopefully provide you with good enough overview so you can decide for yourself if it's worth playing it. Full disclosure though, this video is sponsored by the developers of Etheria Restart, but they were confident enough to give me full creative control and are open to any feedback, which is great. Also, I have played and recorded the game during closed beta with a normal and test account, which means in some parts of the video you might see wacky resources or maxed out units. However, I also spent about 20 more hours playing the global version as well, so I can provide you with the most up-to-date review. Anyway, so let's start with the gameplay overview. If you're an inexperienced gacha player, most of the gameplay loop will appear unsurprising, since it's got the usual journey. Beat story mode to unlock other modes, grind the gear, pull for characters, complete time-limited events for precious resources, and then participate in PvP, which is going to have a huge presence in this game, and I'll talk a lot more about it later on. Now, personally, I don't mind this type of progression because that means I'll spend less brainpower figuring out the game modes. However, Etheria Restart definitely provides its own unique twists. Like, first of all, while you'll be navigating the menus all the time, story mode is actually set in 3D maps you can explore with the main character, where you can also find some chests, secrets, and collectibles. So kinda like HSR in a way. Unfortunately, the story didn't really draw me in, so I just kinda skipped it, but who knows, maybe you'll enjoy it. On the flip side, you can customize your MC and its companion with cute outfits. Now, while there are modes where you can grind for resources, such as the daily tab, there's also trial challenges. For example, Phantom Theater is a co-op mode you can matchmake or play together with friends to collect some sweet rewards each day, or go into Ethernet Rally mode, where you have to use 3 separate teams to fight and explore this big map of nodes to reach the final boss in the center. And there's even limited event modes such as Cubic Game, which is probably my favorite one so far. You have to stack these buffs on the grid to boost the enemies, and the stronger they are, the better the rewards once defeated. But yeah, overall there's plenty of activities you'll find to do, and while in the beginning most of the time will be spent burning through the stamina system called stability to grind for gear, there's definitely enough stuff to do after you gain that gear and utilize it to beat other modes. Speaking of which, while you cannot sweep beaten stages like in other gachas, you can enable auto-farming and even go on and do something else in the game. On top of that, the star rating determines how many fights you can queue up, so unlike most other gachas where you need 3 stars to auto or sweep stuff, here you just need to beat the stage once to start auto-farming it. I personally would still prefer sweeping because I do play other gacha games and I just want to quickly dump my stamina and move on, but I guess this is better than literally sitting there and just watching the fights go by. But let's talk about the characters and combat. So the units in this game are called Animus, powerful beings who exist in Etheria's virtual world, and you as the main character get to befriend them, I guess? Anyway, so there's one of 5 affinities Animus can belong to: Reason, Hollow, Odd, and then Disorder and Constant, or as I like to call it, Red, Green, Blue, and Dark and Light. I mean, we've seen this rock, paper, scissors system a million times in other turn-based gachas. However, the reward and punishment here is much more impactful. If you attack with an advantageous affinity, crit rate and damage will be increased by 15%. But if you attack with a disadvantageous affinity, then crit rate will be lowered by 30%, effect accuracy by 50%, and even damage will be reduced by 15%. So good luck applying any debuffs or scoring critical hits on those enemies. The other big thing is that Dark and Light Animus are much more harder to acquire in this game, and as you can see, they can only get an advantage against each other. So basically, these 2 affinities will never have a disadvantage against other affinities. Still, when looking at combat, it's got a turn meter, which can be manipulated both by enemies and allies, and then each unit has 3 abilities. The leftmost is like their basic attack, while the other 2 will usually have a cooldown, and most of the time, the rightmost ability is considered their ultimate. And I gotta say, the animations look quite crispy, and even after spending over 20 hours with some units, it's still a delight to watch those powerful ultis hitting the enemies. Now, there's 4 ways to grow the character's power. The first one, of course, is by raising their level, and then awakening them to unlock higher level cap, which means even if the unit is of lowest rarity, they can still reach the same level cap as the highest SSR rarity, which is pretty nice, since even when looking at some early rankings, some second highest rarity SR units actually actually are easier to build and perform quite well in all modes. Then we have modules, which are basically artifacts. You grind these modules from one of 3 bosses in Threshold mode, and kinda in the same way as the Epic 7 bosses, each will drop different module sets. On top of that, you will need to bring different units to counter these boss mechanics. For example, Doki Doki provides a huge damage reduction buff, but if your units are able to apply control effects, then this buff will disappear. So you could, for example, bring Kazuya, who can apply some CC on the enemies. Then we have the shell system, and it's my favorite system here because in this game, you only have to pull for units. That's all. The shell system here acts kind of like a weapon for the unit, but instead, we have these super cute monsters. And guess what? You can farm any of these monsters from the Grim Pursuit mode. And not only do they provide stat boosts, but each one also comes with a unique passive or active ability. And you can even see these cuties next to the character when their ability activates. Also, notice how both the shells and modules provide these icons? Well, they're called matrices, and they basically act as a set bonuses whenever you have enough of these icons. For example, I have both Swift Rush and Onslaught bonuses active on this unit, and as you can see, this is how many icons I have obtained, and these are the bonuses I'm able to obtain based on how many icons or matrices are acquired from both modules and the shell. So a pretty cool and innovative system where you can build units in many different ways. There's also like a billion different set bonuses in the game right now, and even cooler sets exist in the very late game. Now finally, we have the prowess, and this is where you basically get to level up each skill by up to 5 times. Not only that, but most nodes will also give just raw stat increases along the way. However, even after playing both during CBT and now the global version, this specific resource called Lattice is needed to raise the skill's level, and it is quite scarce, especially since SSR units require even rarer version of it, and besides a few places where you can obtain it, this will be the biggest bottleneck when it comes to fully upgrading your units. I'm not sure how the developers will handle this, but hopefully this material will show up constantly during time-limited events. But yeah, not a huge fan of this resource gating. Anyway, I think it's time to examine the gacha aspect of the game because it is actually quite enticing. So first of all, there are featured banners with a hard pity of 80 summons. In closed beta, it was 100, but now in the global version, it's down to 80. So it is important to note that the devs are sacrificing potential revenue and listening to the community's feedback instead. However, there is no soft pity for these limited banners, but there's also no 50-50, meaning once you reach 80 summons, you just simply get that featured character, and the pity progress carries over. So overall, what this means compared to other popular gacha games, featured units are quite easy to obtain, assuming there will be a steady flow of summon currency each patch cycle. Then for all new accounts, there's targeted summon where after 40 pulls, you will obtain one of the selected units. There are no light and dark units here though, just red, green, blue, but I would still suggest holding off from summoning on this banner until you exhaust all of your summon currencies so that you can then decide which missing unit is worth getting from here. Then we have the permanent banner, or basically the standard banner. This one actually has soft pity starting from 50 pulls and becomes increasingly higher, and then at 80 pulls, it's guaranteed you'll receive an SSR unit. And looking at the pool of units, we can see red, green, blue units have 75% to show up, while light and dark units only have 25%. Still, one of the most crucial things about this permanent banner is that, as far as I'm aware, after the limited banner is over, units will eventually get added to this pool. Finally, there's a bunch of banners that show up when you obtain these special tickets that allow you to immediately pull for SR or SSR units, and then there's also the extra affinity summon banner, which is exclusively made up of light and dark units. Now, the thing is, there's 2 pull tickets, Anima Prototype and Apex Prototype. Anima is used for limited, targeted, and permanent banner, while Apex is used on limited, light and dark banner and extra affinity banner. And here's the thing, you can only spend Hydro Crystals, the generic gem currency you obtain from the game, on the limited light dark banner, while the extra affinity is only accepting Apex Prototypes. And interestingly enough, one Anima Prototype costs 100 Hydro Crystals, but one Apex Prototype costs 300 Hydro Crystals, so 3 times more expensive. Look, long story short, light and dark units are quite premium in this game and will require more pull currency to obtain them. So overall, I'd say I do enjoy the fact there is no 50-50, but in exchange, light and dark units are harder to obtain. Also, this game has a dupe system. Each unit can obtain up to 5 more dupes, which will in return increase their stats in some way. There are no new abilities that they would unlock, but the stat increases can be utilized in places like PvP modes, so keep that in mind. And since we're on that topic, let's talk about the main draw of the game, PvP. Currently, it's got 3 different modes. Etheria, where you just pick and fight other players' AI-controlled teams, so all you gotta do is just inspect to see who you're up against and counter those teams if you have the right units, so pretty casual way to obtain some great rewards. But then, moving over to a more sweatier mode, we have Summit Arena. This is where you fight people in real time, also known as RTA, Real Time Arena. And it's a pretty fun mode because after choosing 5 units, you and the opponent then each have an opportunity to ban one of the chosen units. So you'll have to be smart who you want to pick and have a sound strategy where any of the 4 leftover units are enough to beat the opponent. Interestingly enough, once you reach gold ranking, one unit will be able to receive ban protection. Ultimately, this mode, especially in higher tiers, will test your knowledge of the game, current meta, and of course, how well your account is invested in, because more units means more ways to counter your enemy's picks. Now, both this mode and Etheria will be a crucial source of lattices, the materials that level up unit skills. And while reaching the top ranking awards these lattices, luckily there's also a rotating shop that has them up for sale too. So even if you keep losing the matches, you can still use the currency obtained from the fights to purchase the lattices and other goodies. More importantly, you can also purchase dupes from the shop for your animus. And this is a brand new change coming with the global launch, so it's good to know that free-to-play people can save up on this PvP currency to get more dupes of existing units. Finally, there's Fearless Arena, which is a tournament that's open every Saturday and Sunday, where you have to win best of 1 matches until the finals, and then if you do reach the finals, the champion is then determined in a best of 3 match. It's a pretty intense mode, but I would still encourage anyone to try it out. There's still rewards you can obtain just for participating in it. But yeah, overall, PvP definitely feels like a big part of the game, since it will be one of the main sources to obtain lattices among other important resources. Although, luckily enough, just participating in these modes will be enough to buy the lattices, while those who achieve high rankings will gain more of it. Still, I would like to point out that the PvE side of the game does not feel like an afterthought. There will be many modes where you will need to utilize a lot of your units, and most bosses will require different team comps to beat them consistently. I mean, heck, even looking at this initial Pride 1's tier list, we can see a lot of units differ in power, depending on which mode they are utilized in. Also, as a newbie player, you will have a very nice tutorial/guide to follow along called Hyperlink Charter, and it's also going to be a huge source of rewards. If that's not enough, you will obtain a couple of SSRs for free, like Leon, who will be your main DPS to clear waves of enemies, while Ling Lo is awarded after you complete a 7-day event, and she's like one of the best healers. Plus, there's tons of events that the game will be launching with, and I'm not even gonna bother going through all of them, but as you can see, just heaps of rewards for every small thing you do. So at least the honeymoon phase, from my own experience, was superb to say the least. And as far as I'm aware, I was able to get like 500 free summons within the first few weeks of gaming, and with the gacha rates and banners I've showcased, I think it's pretty clear why Etheria feels so rewarding for free-to-play crowd. But let's be real here. Since PvP exists, obviously anybody who whales will have a massive advantage compared to others, especially in the beginning weeks. And it's not that they will have better characters. Sure, if they obtain the dupes, they will be better by a certain amount, but it's the resources that will propel them in early game PvP rankings, such as better modules and shells. However, it's pretty clear once free-to-play catch up to the late game, everyone should be hopefully on the same footing, since like 90% of units' power is determined by their shells and modules, which everyone will need to farm endlessly. But still, I cannot comment too much on how PvP will evolve over time, since it's something that's ever-changing in gacha games. However, I will say that Etheria enables a strong community presence with things like world and guild chat that you can engage in and talk with others. And then there's the guild system called Union, which is especially nice because not only can you do unique weekly tasks here for rewards, but you can also fight the Union boss that rotates, and you can talk with other guildmates to help you out if you have any questions, since I'm sure a lot of people will be following the PvP meta. On top of that, I saw in the launch notes there will be an entire guild versus guild event a few weeks after the server is live. But yeah, overall, I found Etheria Restart to be an enjoyable turn-based gacha game. There's definitely tons of things you can do here even from day one, and not to mention the fact my little brain enjoyed those dopamine releases from each reward I got to claim from events and missions tab. Sure, there's PvP, and I know this isn't everyone's cup of tea, but as someone who also prefers to just play PvE gachas, I didn't feel like the PvP was too intrusive. I just did my dailies and acquired the currencies to purchase lattices. However, if you are super interested in theory crafting and finding ways to counter opponents, then yeah, PvP definitely feels super fleshed out here, and heck, the developers are already cultivating an esports scene, and I hope that works out for them. Anyway, hope you found this video interesting, and I do recommend checking out Etheria Restart. You can do so by using my link in the description, and there's also a gift code shown here you can use to claim extra goodies. Most important of all, this will also help support my channel, and I hope you have a great time with this new gacha game. Thanks, and see you soon.